Aloha, everyone. Oh, bless you, Scooter. Good morning. I hope you're doing great today. Hey, anyone else feel those earthquakes the past couple of days? Yeah, I guess they're considered aftershocks because they're not as strong as the first earthquake that we had. So these are still aftershocks a month after the earthquake that we had, but they're still pretty strong, so I just consider them earthquakes. Anyway, things have just been shaking and rattling around in my house lately. Don't know about you guys. Yeah, I hope you're up to some fun things and enjoying these videos. And I miss your cute smiling faces. So, yeah, that's about it. Okay, you ready for more Fablehaven? We're at an exciting part, right? Page 314. So they've taken refuge at the pond, and Kendra and Grandpa are trying to talk to Lena to try and get some help or something like that. Okay, let's find out what happens. Kendra gazed down at the framed sepia photograph. Even with old-fashioned hair and a heavy mustache, Patton had been a strikingly handsome man. He was not smiling, but something in his expression screamed playful cockiness. Of course, her perception might be tainted by her having read so many entries in his journals. Grandpa walked beside her onto the little pier that projected from the base of one of the gazebos. On one side of the pier floated the boathouse Patton had constructed. The pond was basically smooth. She saw no sign of the naiads. Her gaze wandered to the island at the center of the pond, where the tiny shrine to the fairy queen lay hidden among the shrubs. "I think I'll also ask Lena if we can get the bowl back," Kendra said. "The bowl from the shrine?" Grandpa asked. "I was talking to a fairy earlier this summer, Shiara, who told me the naiads claimed the bowl as a trophy." Grandpa frowned. "They guard the shrine. I assumed that trusting the bowl to their care would be the best way to ensure it was returned, since treading on the island is forbidden." Shiara said I wouldn't have been punished for personally returning it. Her words felt true. I was thinking, if I could get the bowl, maybe you could use it as an excuse to safely gain access to the island and approach the fairy queen about the plague. The odds for success aren't terrific, but we can at least inquire about the bowl, Grandpa said. Right, Kendra said. She strode down the pier, glancing back when Grandpa did not accompany her. "I'll hang back and let you call to Lena," Grandpa said. "I had no luck last time." Kendra walked to the end of the quay, stopping a few feet from the edge. She knew not to get near enough to the water for the naiads to grab hold of her. "Lena, it's Kendra. We need to talk." "Look who blew in with the homeless land plotters," said a snide female voice from below the water. "I thought that puppet would have strangled her by now," responded a second speaker. Kendra scowled. Upon one of her previous visits to the pond, the naiads had released Mendigo. Still under orders from Muriel the Witch, the lumberjack had snatched Kendra and taken her to the hill where the Forgotten Chapel once stood. "You might as well summon Lena," Kendra stated. "I brought her a present she'll want to see." "You may as well hobble away on your clumsy stilts," admonished a third voice. "Lena wants nothing to do with ground stalkers." Kendra raised her voice even more. "Lena, I brought a picture of your favorite land plotter, a photograph of Patton." "Go dig a hole and lie in it," hissed the first voice with a hint of desperation. "Even a dull-witted air-gulper should recognize when her company is undesired." "Grow old and die," spat another naiad. "Kendra, wait," called a familiar voice, dreamy and musical. Lena drifted into view, her upturned face just below the surface of the water. She looked even younger than the last time Kendra had seen her. Not a trace of gray remained in her black hair. "Lena," Kendra said, "we need your help." Lena regarded Kendra with her dark almond-shaped eyes. "You mentioned a photograph." "Patton looks very handsome in it." "What would Lena care about some dry old picture?" squealed a voice. Other naiads tittered. "What do you need?" Lena inquired sedately. "I have good reason to believe Patton brought a second artifact to Fablehaven. I'm talking about the serious artifacts, the ones the society wants. Do you know anything about it?" Lena stared at Kendra. "I remember. Patton made me pledge not to share the secret unless it was absolutely necessary. That man was so funny about his mysteries, as if any of it really mattered." "Lena, We absolutely need to locate the artifact. Fablehaven is on the brink of collapse. Again? Do you hope to trade the photograph for information about the artifact? Kendra, the water would ruin it. Not the photo itself, Kendra said, just a peek. How long has it been since you've seen his face? For an instant, Lena looked wounded, but her serenity returned almost immediately. Don't you see that finding the artifact is irrelevant? Everything up there ends. Everything is fleeting, illusory, temporary. All you can show me is a flat image of my beloved, a lifeless memory. The real man is gone, as you will be also. If it truly doesn't matter, Lena, Grandpa said from farther back on the pier, why not tell us? The information means nothing to you, but here now, for the short time we live and breathe, it matters to us. The old one is yapping now, complained an unseen naiad. Don't answer him, Lena, encouraged a second voice. Wait him out. He'll be dead before you know it. Several voices giggled. Have you forgotten our friendship, Lena? Grandpa asked. Please tell us, Kendra said. For Patton? She held up the picture. Lena's eyes widened. Her face broke the surface of the water and she mouthed Patton's name. Don't make us drag you under, warned a voice. Touch me, and so help me, I'll abandon you, Lena murmured, entranced by the image Kendra held. Lena's gaze shifted to Kendra. All right, Kendra, perhaps this is what he would have wanted. He hid the artifact in the old manor. Where in the manor? Kendra asked. It will be hard to find. Go to the northernmost room on the 3rd floor. The safe with the artifact inside appears every Monday at noon for 1 minute. Does the safe have a key? Kendra asked. A combination, said Lena. Right twice to 33, left once to 22, and then right to 31. Kendra glanced at Grandpa. He was jotting down the numbers. Got that? She asked. 33, 22, 31, he said, giving Lena a funny look. His former housekeeper averted her eyes shyly. I have another question, Kendra said. What did Kirisak do to Patton's uncle? I don't know, Lena said. Patton never shared that story. It plainly pained him, so I never pressed. He meant to tell me, I think, in his later years. He repeatedly told me I would hear the tale one day. So you know nothing about Kirisak? Kendra asked. Only that he is a demon on this preserve, and he may have been somehow affiliated with the apparition who usurped the manor. What apparition? Kendra asked. It happened before my fall to mortality. Like I said, I never learned the details. The apparition who destroyed Marshall no doubt still resides in the manor. Patton hid the artifact there because it would be well guarded. Marshall was Patton's uncle? Kendra asked. Marshall Burgess. One last thing. There is a silver bowl. The Fairy Queen gave it to me. Lena nodded. Forget the bowl. You cast it into the pond and we have claimed it. I need it back, Kendra said. There was a chorus of hearty laughter from the other naiads. It's the key for me to safely approach the Fairy Queen again. She may be our only hope to overcoming the plague. Come over to the edge and I'll hand it to you, taunted an unseen naiad. Several other voices tittered. The bowl is their most treasured keepsake, Lena said. We will never relinquish it. I had best go. My sisters become skittish when I spend too much time near the surface. Kendra felt tears in her eyes. Are you happy, Lena? Happy enough. My sisters have striven to rehabilitate me. The glimpse of Patton was thoughtful, although it made old wounds ache. For the kindness of the gesture, I told you what you wanted. Enjoy what time you have. Lena sank into the pond. Kendra stared after her, but the pond was deep and Lena was soon out of sight. Grandpa approached behind Kendra, placing his hands on her shoulders. Well done, Kendra. Very well done. The withered one grabbed the obnoxious one, observed a voice. Push her in, cried another. Let's get away from here, Kendra said. Chapter 17, Preparations. The largest of the 3 tents Dale had brought from the house was the biggest privately owned tent Seth had ever seen. The square monstrosity had broad purple and yellow stripes and a steep curving roof that sloped up to a high central pole with a banner at the pinnacle. The flap over the wide entrance was propped on rods to form a sizable awning. The smaller tents were also fairly roomy, but their dimensions and coloring were less eccentric. Seth sat in the entrance of the tent where he, Warren, and Dale would be staying. Grandma and Grandpa were sharing the big one, and Kendra got her own, which Seth did not like, but sadly he could think of no reasonable arguments why the arrangements should be otherwise. He had resolved that if the weather stayed pleasant, he would go sleep in one of the gazebos. A barefooted dryad approached Grandpa's tent. Her long auburn hair hung past her waist, and her robes evoked memories of bright autumn leaves. He crouched to duck through the entrance. She crouched to duck through the entrance. How tall did that make her? 7 feet? More? Seth had seen several interesting characters come and go from Grandpa's tent over the past hour, but when he had sought admittance, Grandma had shooed him away, promising that he would soon be part of the conversation. A red fairy with wings like flower petals shot through the air. Seth could not tell whether she had emerged from Grandpa's tent or had come whizzing over the top from behind. She hovered for a moment not far from Seth before streaking out of view. Absently uprooting handfuls of grass, Seth resolved not to be excluded any longer. Clearly, Grandpa and Grandma preferred to gather news and opinions in a way that would allow them to regulate the information, sharing only those facts and ideas deemed suitable for his frail brain. But hearing the unedited details from the actual creatures was half the fun, and whether his grandparents believed it or not, Seth knew he was mature enough to handle anything they could hear. Besides, was it his fault that the walls of the tent were so thin? He rose and strolled to the back of the yellow and purple tent, sitting in the shade on the lawn with his back to the fabric wall. Straining to listen, he tried to look idle and bored. He heard only the clamor of the satyrs playing on the boardwalk. "You won't hear anything," Warren said, coming around the side of the tent. Seth hopped guiltily to his feet. "I just wanted to relax in the shade," he said. "The tent is magically soundproof, a fact you might have known if you'd helped us set it up." "I'm sorry, Warren held up a hand. "If our roles were reversed, I would have been anxious to meet all the creatures here too. Don't worry, I would have come and nabbed you had we really needed your help. Have you enjoyed yourself?" "The centaurs weren't very nice," Seth said. "It looked like they spoke to you. That alone is a feat." "What's with them?" Seth asked. "In a word, arrogance," replied Warren. "They see themselves as the apex of all creation. All else lies beneath their notice." "Kinda like fairies," Seth said. "Yes and no. Fairies are vain and find most of our affairs boring, but whatever they pretend, they care what we think about them. Centaurs neither seek nor appreciate our admiration. If anything, they take it for granted. Unlike fairies, centaurs sincerely perceive all other creatures as inherently lower than themselves." "They sound like my math teacher," Seth said. Warren grinned. Seth noticed some dark fairies floating just beyond the nearest portion of the hedge wall. This plague got to the centaurs just like it affected everyone else. "Had it not, I doubt they would display any interest," Warren said. "In fairness, they have some excuse for their haughtiness. Centaurs tend to be brilliant thinkers, gifted artisans, and formidable warriors. Pride itself is their greatest flaw." "Seth!" Grandma called from the other side of the tent. "Dale! Warren! Kendra! Come counsel with us." "There you go," Warren said, sounding relieved himself. "The wait is over." Part of Seth wondered if Warren had wandered to the back of the tent in order to quietly verify whether it was actually as soundproof as it purported. They walked around to the front of the tent, passing the towering dryad with the autumnal robes and an aged satyr with a white goatee and deep laugh lines. Kendra unzipped her tent and came outside. Dale jogged toward them from the direction of the dwarf encampment. Grandma and Grandpa waited at the entrance of the tent and welcomed them inside. Both Stan and Ruth looked tired and careworn. The tent was so large that Seth half expected to find it furnished, but there were only a pair of rolled sleeping bags in the corner and some gear. They all sat on the floor, which was quite comfortable thanks to the springy turf underneath. The sunlight filtered through the yellow and purple fabric gave the room an odd cast. "I have a question," Kendra said. "If the evil brownies stole the register, can't they just change the rules and let dark creatures come in here?" "Most of the boundaries and borders of Fablehaven are fixed by the treaty that established the preserve and are therefore unchangeable while the treaty stands," Grandma explained. "The register simply allows us to regulate access to the preserve as a whole, and to dictate which creatures could cross the barriers guarding our home. The magical barriers protecting this area are different from most of the boundaries at Fablehaven. Most boundaries are established to limit access, by particular types of creature. There are certain sectors where fairies are allowed, and satyrs, and fog giants, and so forth. Some creatures are granted more area to roam than others, based on how potentially harmful they are to others. Since most of the boundaries are divided according to species, when the light creatures started turning dark, they retained access to the same areas. But the border around the pond and this field functions according to affiliation with light or darkness, Grandpa said. Once a creature starts drawing more upon darkness than light, that creature can no longer enter here. How long will this place hold off the darkness? Seth asked. We wish we knew, Grandma said. Perhaps for a good while, perhaps for another hour. We can be certain only that our backs are to the wall. We are almost out of options. If we fail to take effective action, the preserve will soon fall. I conferred with my most trustworthy contacts from among the creatures gathered here, Grandpa said, his demeanor becoming more official. In an effort to gauge the level of support we could expect from the various races, I traded words with at least one delegate from most of them, excluding the brownies and the centaurs. As a whole, the creatures here feel sufficiently cornered and intimidated by this plague that I believe we can count on considerable assistance as needed. But we did not want any of them here while we discussed strategy, Grandma said. We withheld certain key information. If they should become contaminated, most, if not all, would utterly betray us. Why do the creatures all change so completely? Kendra asked. Seth said that Coulter and Tanu kept helping us after they were transformed. You ask a difficult question, Grandpa said. The short answer is that as non-magical mortal beings, humans are affected differently by the plague. The rest requires speculation. For the most part, unapologetically, magical creatures are what they are. They tend to be less self-aware than humans, relying more on instinct. We humans are conflicted beings. Our beliefs don't always harmonize with our instincts, and our behavior doesn't always reflect our beliefs. We constantly struggle with right and wrong. We wage war between the person we are and the person we hope to become. We have a lot of practice wrestling with ourselves. As a result, compared to magical creatures, we humans are much more able to suppress our natural inclinations in order to deliberately choose our identities. I don't get it, Seth said. Each human being has significant potential for light and darkness, Grandpa continued. Over a lifetime, we get a lot of practice leaning toward one or the other. Having made different choices, a renowned hero could have been a wretched villain. My guess is that when Coulter and Tanu were transformed, their minds resisted the darkness in a way most magical creatures can't imagine. I still don't see how somebody nice like Newell could instantly become so evil, Seth said. Grandpa held up a finger. I don't view most magical creatures as good or evil. What they are largely governs how they act. In order to be good, you must recognize the difference between right and wrong and strive to choose the right. To be truly evil, you must do the contrary. Being good or evil is a choice. Instead, the creatures of Fablehaven are light or dark. Some are inherently builders, some are nurturers, some are playful. Some are inherently destroyers, some are deceivers, some crave power. Some love light, some love darkness, but change their nature, and without much resistance their identities follow, like a fairy becoming an imp, or an imp regaining her fairyhood. Grandpa looked at Grandma. Am I waxing too philosophical? A little, she said. Questions that start with why are the toughest to answer, Dale said. You end up guessing more than knowing. I think I get what you mean, Kendra said. A demon like Bahamut automatically hates and destroys because he sees no other option. He isn't questioning his actions or resisting a conscience. Someone like Muriel, who deliberately chose to serve darkness, is more evil. So, Newell acted differently because he isn't Newell anymore, Seth concluded. The plague totally overwhelmed him. He's something else. That's the basic idea, Grandpa said. Warren sighed. If a starving bear ate my family, even though he may have had no wicked intentions, even though he was just being a bear, his nature has made him a menace, and I'm going to shoot him. He sounded exasperated by the conversation. The bear would have to be stopped, Grandma agreed. Stan is just making the distinction that you wouldn't blame the bear the same way you would blame a responsible person. I get the distinction, Warren said. I have a different opinion about magical creatures. I can think of many creatures who have chosen to carry out good or evil actions regardless of their nature. I hold dark creatures more accountable for what they are and what they do than Stan does. As is your right, Grandpa said. The issue is largely academic, although some who share your view would use it as an excuse to eradicate all dark creatures, a notion I find detestable. I'll agree that creatures of light can be deadly. Consider the naiads, who drown the innocent for sport. The fairy queen herself strikes down those who tread near her shrine uninvited. And creatures of darkness can be helpful. Look at Growlithe, supplying key information, or the goblins who reliably patrol our dungeon. This fascinating debate aside, Grandma said testily, the matter at hand is to halt the plague at any cost. We're on the brink of destruction. Everyone nodded. Straightening his shirt, looking somewhat chagrined, Grandpa shifted gears. Lena didn't know much more about Curaçao except to confirm that he was involved with the fiend who now controls the old manor. But she was able to tell us much about the second artifact. He related the details about the location of the safe, the time it would appear, and the combination. Any guess which artifact it is? Warren asked. She didn't say, Kendra answered. The artifact could wield power over space or time, Grandma said. It could enhance vision, or it could bestow immortality. Those are supposedly the powers of the 4 that remain unclaimed. Do you think the artifact might help us reverse the plague? Seth asked. We can hope, Grandpa said. For now, recovering it is the most pressing task. On top of claiming the artifact, risking an excursion to the manor would also serve as useful reconnaissance. Anything we can discover about Curaçao and those associated with him could help us unravel the mystery of the plague. Dale cleared his throat. Not to gainsay you, Stan, but considering what we know about the old manor, the odds may not be good that any of us will return. We know that a dreaded presence haunts the property there, Grandpa admitted, but those rumors were started by Patton, who had good reason to scare people away. Because he hid the artifact there, Kendra said. Furthermore, Grandpa continued, we know of somebody who unwittingly entered the manor and survived to tell the tale. All eyes turned to Seth. I guess I did. I hadn't drunk milk yet that day. I had just escaped from Aulic, so I couldn't see what anything actually was. In fact, maybe that's the only reason I got out of there at all. I've wondered the same thing, Grandma said. Roaming the preserve without consuming milk has advantages and drawbacks, Grandpa said. There is evidence that if you are unable to perceive magical creatures, they must exert greater effort in order to perceive you. In addition, many of the dark creatures feed on fear. If you fail to recognize them for what they are, the fear is diminished, and their motivation to inflict harm is reduced. But just because you can't see magical creatures doesn't mean they aren't there, Dale interjected. Wandering the preserve without milk is a fine way to stroll blissfully into a death trap. Which is the downside, Grandpa affirmed. Grandma leaned forward eagerly. But if we know where we're going and have an idea what awaits us, and we stick to the path on the way there and back, not drinking the milk may give us the advantage we need to sneak past the apparition and reach the safe. Seth, how long were you in the manor before the whirlwind pursued you? Several minutes, Seth said, enough time to climb to the top floor, step out onto the roof, get my bearings, come back into the room, and start down the hall. Foregoing the milk sounds like our best option, Warren said. You say the safe will appear tomorrow? At noon, Grandpa said, and then not for another week. We can't afford to wait. And that's where I'm going to leave you hanging for today. I know, I sound super excited about that, but you guys, I love these books, and I love that you're joining me for listening to them still, even though we can't be together. So, yeah, I hope you are good, friends, and staying warm and staying safe. So if your house gives a little shake, just stay calm. It's gonna be all right. All right, guys, I will talk to you next time. See ya.